This story takes us to the United States in 2018, a year when a dark secret simmered beneath the surface, waiting to explode. But how far would someone go to bury a truth too sinister to face? A truth so damning that if revealed, it would lead straight to a prison cell. This is the story of a man who spun his own nightmare, a man whose solution to his dilemma was nothing short of monstrous. Meet Jonathan. Born in 1985, his past carries little weight in this story, because it's what he became that truly matters. Those who knew him would have described him as charismatic, hardworking, and well-liked. A skilled handyman, a reliable mechanic, a devoted husband, or so it seemed. By 2017, at 32 years old, Jonathan was living in Jacksonville, Florida, with his wife Naomi. Together, they were building a life, raising a child and planning for their second. Naomi came from a tight-knit family, a family where loyalty ran deep. She had sisters who were more than just siblings, they were best friends. And in that family, Jonathan played his part well. He was the dependable brother-in-law, the fun-loving uncle. One of Naomi's sisters, Kimberly Moy, had 4 children, and her kids spent countless weekends at their Aunt Naomi and Uncle Jonathan's home. Sometimes they even stayed for the summer. To everyone, Jonathan was the uncle they adored. But beneath the mask of warmth and care lurked something far more disturbing. Because by late 2017, Jonathan had started something horrifying. He had his sights set on one of those children, his own niece, Iyana Sawyer. She was only 15 years old. Iyana was the light of her family, their princess. Raised in a household where sisterhood was everything, she carried that same sense of loyalty into her own relationships. She had a little sister, known as SS, and 2 younger brothers whom she adored. She wasn't just their sister, she was their teacher, their protector. Iyana helped them with schoolwork, taught them respect, and made sure they knew they were loved. Her kindness extended beyond her family. At school, she was a standout student, a scholarship recipient, an honor roll regular, and already enrolled in college-level courses, preparing for a future that was supposed to be bright. She had talent, drive, and endless potential. She was studying violin. She was a dedicated dancer. She had dreams, big ones, but her future was stolen by the darkness lurking within her own home. Jonathan had been grooming her from within the family, weaving a web of manipulation and abuse. He preyed on her innocence, on her trust, on the love she had for her family. And whenever the opportunity arose, he took advantage of her. Even worse, he didn't stop with Iyana. Her younger sister became his target too, though the full extent of what he did remains a painful mystery. To Iyana, it was all confusing. He made her believe he cared. He showered her with attention, whispered promises that blurred the lines between love and control. But just as easily as he gave, he could take away. One moment, he made her feel special. The next, he was cold, cruel, playing mind games designed to keep her exactly where he wanted her. And Iyana wrote it all down. In her journal, she captured the nightmare in her own words, the twisted cycle of affection and torment, the manipulation, the shame, the pain. Then, on August 7th, 2018, Jonathan sent her a message. He told her it had to end, that what they were doing was dangerous, that they needed to stop. But then came the lie, the one designed to keep her hooked. He told Iyana that he loved her, that he wanted to be with her, that they just had to wait. When she turned 18, he promised he would leave Naomi. He would run away with her. They would have children, 2 kids, but only after she finished college. A perfect life. Just not yet. But of course it didn't stop. Jonathan continued his vile acts. And just 1 month after sending that message, Iyana's worst fear became reality. She was pregnant. The discovery of Iyana's pregnancy sent shockwaves through her family, stirring a mixture of emotions, fear, confusion, and disbelief. She refused to reveal the identity of the father, leaving her family in the dark, but they promised her their unwavering support. They knew something was wrong, but couldn't yet grasp the full horror of the situation. Behind closed doors, they began to suspect the truth. Iyana had been preyed upon by a man named Kamar Humphreys, a man 2 decades her senior, who had used his position of power to manipulate and control her. But the real nightmare had only just begun. Jonathan, the true father, had his own dark intentions. Even though he was responsible for Iyana's pregnancy, he wasn't willing to face the truth or take responsibility. Instead, he tightened his grip on her, using his position of influence to manipulate her into secrecy. He promised her the world, telling her that when she was pregnant again, he would cook for her until she couldn't eat, and how deeply he loved her. His promises seemed comforting, but they were a facade. By late August 2018, his patience had worn thin, and he began pressuring Iyana to terminate the pregnancy. He even bought pills, attempting to force her hand, but Iyana stood firm. She wasn't going to give up on the child. The defiance only fueled Jonathan's obsession. His messages turned darker. What started as promises of love now carried a sinister tone, a chilling sense of ownership over her life. "I'm so in love with you. I'll kill you and cry," he wrote. Later, another message came. "You're stuck with me until you die." These words weren't the ramblings of a man in love. They were the ravings of a man spiraling into obsession, unable to let go of his lies and control. Jonathan's fear of the truth coming to light consumed him. His mind raced, knowing that the walls were closing in. His wife, Naomi, was pregnant, and the fear of his actions being exposed made him desperate. His marriage was on the line, his secrets threatening to unravel everything. The pressure built within Jonathan, and as December 2018 rolled around, the dark plan he had been mulling over began to take shape. On December 19th, the day Iyana disappeared, everything changed. It started as a seemingly normal day. Iyana had traveled to school with her sister, but by the end of the day, her sister was alone. Iyana was gone. Jonathan had picked her up from school at midday, claiming they were going to start a new life together. He promised her freedom, but his version of freedom was far darker than she could ever imagine. He drove her to Ace Pick-Apart, his workplace, a junkyard where he had laid the groundwork for his sinister plan. Jonathan was armed, a 9mm pistol in his possession. CCTV footage would later show him leaving the junkyard, but there was something wrong. Iyana was nowhere to be seen when he returned. He knew the layout of the junkyard all too well, and he led Iyana to a part of the compound where there was no video surveillance, where screams could be drowned out by the deafening noise of the junkyard machinery. It was here, in this isolated corner, that Jonathan prepared to take her life. He had been planning this for weeks, knowing that the following day was trash collection day. He was the one in charge of the industrial 40-yard dumpster, and he knew the trash would be taken away, no questions asked. He also knew that rain was forecasted, which meant any evidence could easily be washed away. Jonathan had done this before. He had been abusive and threatening, but Iyana had always seen him as a lover, a protector, even though he was also her uncle. That day, he taunted her, leading her to a red sedan he had already chosen as the vehicle to crush the following day. He promised her it was part of their escape, a future where they would be free, but Iyana was about to face a fate far more sinister. As she climbed into the car, Jonathan's grip tightened. He reached for her neck and began to strangle her, his hands cutting off her breath. He watched emotionless as her life drained away. But then, something snapped inside him. The intimacy of the act, taking her life with his bare hands, was too much for him to bear. He let go, and Iyana's body went limp. Panic surged through him. Frantic, Jonathan grabbed his phone and called his brother Joseph. His voice was unsteady, panicked, nothing like the calm, controlled man he had once been. He told Joseph what had just happened, describing in chilling detail how he had strangled Iyana, only to stop when it became too real. Joseph, stunned and horrified, didn't know what to do. The call ended, leaving Jonathan alone with his victim. There would be no going back now. Without hesitation, Jonathan pulled out his pistol. He aimed it at Iyana's chest and fired. The bullet hit its mark, striking her heart. Iyana, just 16 years old, died instantly. The child she carried was gone too. Jonathan wasn't finished yet. He had planned every step of this twisted scenario, and now he had to see it through. Later, a jailhouse informant would reveal the gruesome details of his actions. Jonathan wrapped Iyana's body in a carpet, rolling it up tightly, concealing it as best as he could. He scooped up the blood-soaked soil and added it to the bag with her body. Using a machine, he compressed the carpet even tighter, ensuring that her body would be unrecognizable. Then he placed it in a bucket and sent it off to the dumpster. His task wasn't complete. He needed to erase every trace of what he had done. He drove to a gun range to fire his weapon, hoping the noise would cover up the sound of his earlier shot. That night, Jonathan returned home, and Naomi noticed a strange calm about him. The restless energy that had once consumed him was gone. He slept soundly, like a man who had done something final. The following morning, Jonathan woke up, seemingly unchanged by the horror he had committed. He went to work, climbing into a telescopic handler to move the red sedan into the area designated for crushing. He made sure the dumpster containing Iyana's body was taken away as scheduled, believing his twisted plan had come together without a hitch. Jonathan felt a sense of triumph. He had erased all traces of Iyana, and the world would never know the truth. But when he called his brother again, the weight of what he had done seemed to settle over him. Joseph, still shaken, asked for clarity, and Jonathan confirmed with chilling certainty. "She's gone. I've taken care of everything." Meanwhile, investigators were already starting to piece together the puzzle, but they had no idea that the real nightmare was just beginning. The truth, though buried for now, was still out there, and Jonathan would learn that no lie, no matter how twisted, could stay hidden forever. When Iyana didn't come home from school, her mother, Kimberly, felt an icy chill of dread settle in her stomach. At first, she thought it was nothing more than a delay, but as hours passed, panic began to set in. The family, overwhelmed with worry, could no longer ignore the sinking feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The police quickly sprang into action, responding to the rising anxiety surrounding Iyana's disappearance. They reviewed the CCTV footage around the school, capturing her leaving the premises at around 11 a.m., carrying 2 bags. One was her usual school bag, but the other was different, and it raised more questions than answers. She was seen walking away from the school, but after that, her trail disappeared. No one saw her go anywhere, and there was no indication of what had happened to her. Kimberly and the rest of the family tried to reach her, calling, texting, and leaving desperate voice messages, but there was no response. It was as though Iyana had vanished into thin air. 2 agonizing days passed with no sign of Iyana, and the case was escalated from a runaway to a missing person investigation. Kimberly, fighting against the rising tide of fear, went into her daughter's room, hoping for some clue that might explain her absence. She sifted through Iyana's belongings, praying for a piece of information that would shed light on her whereabouts. It was then, while scanning through Iyana's computer, that Kimberly stumbled upon something that would change everything. A strange document sitting in the recycling bin. She opened it, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a secret journal, a place where Iyana had poured out her heart. The entries chronicled her emotional struggles and a confusing love for a man she referred to only as Jose. Kimberly was stunned. Who was this man? What was he to Iyana? In desperation, Kimberly turned to Iyana's sister, SS, hoping for an explanation. Hesitantly, SS revealed the truth. Jose was not just some mysterious figure. He was their uncle, Jonathan. The police were immediately notified, and they wasted no time in heading to Jonathan's house. Naomi, Jonathan's wife, and Jonathan himself were blindsided by the sudden visit. Jonathan laughed off the accusations, calling them absurd. The idea that he could have had any inappropriate relationship with Iyana was preposterous to him. However, the police weren't convinced. They had a warrant, and they were determined to search his home. Jonathan, despite the circumstances, appeared unnervingly calm. He invited the officers in, offering them food and drinks as if they were mere guests in his home. He seemed unfazed by the investigation, as if the entire situation was just another annoyance to him. But the police had one card left to play. They brought up the document from Iyana's computer. The officers asked pointed questions, suspecting that Jose was, in fact, Jonathan himself. Jonathan and Naomi did little to hide their discomfort. They admitted that rumors had swirled in the past about their relationship with Iyana, rumors that had caused the family to cut ties for a while, only to let them back in once those rumors had been dismissed as baseless. The document, they claimed, was nothing more than a teenage fantasy, an innocent story from a girl who was going through emotional turbulence. But the police weren't willing to let it slide so easily. With growing suspicions, Jonathan was brought in for further questioning. The detectives weren't fooled by Jonathan's calm demeanor. They knew he was hiding something. During the interrogation, he maintained that he had no idea what had happened to Iyana. But deep down, he knew. He knew exactly what had happened. At the sheriff's office, he provided a DNA sample, and the case took a darker turn. A homicide detective took over, and it was then that the police began to piece together a chilling discovery. Iyana had been assaulted by a man named Kamar Humphreys in a previous incident, and the police had collected DNA from Iyana's underwear at the time. When they reviewed the DNA profiles, they found a second, unidentified sample. This sample raised suspicions, and when Jonathan's DNA results came back, they confirmed the horrifying truth. The DNA found on Iyana's underwear matched Jonathan's. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the police still didn't have enough to prove what had happened to Iyana. But then came another twist. Jonathan's own brother, Joseph, had been keeping a secret. On December 19th, Jonathan had called Joseph in a panic. His voice was shaking, frantic. "She might be pregnant. It might be mine. I have to get rid of the body," Jonathan had said. Joseph had been horrified by the call, but had tried to brush it off as a strange misunderstanding. But Jonathan called him again later, his voice cold and final. He told Joseph that he had disposed of her body in a dumpster. "It's done," Jonathan had said. "I can now move on, and my life won't be ruined." Joseph was torn between his loyalty to his brother and the unbearable truth of what he had just heard. After struggling with his conscience, he came forward to the police, revealing everything. Jonathan's denials only added to the mounting evidence, and he was arrested for sexual battery. But the police knew that there was still more to uncover. In a final attempt to crack the case, the detectives placed a wire on an inmate in the county jail and had him placed in a cell with Jonathan. The informant quickly gathered information. He reported that Jonathan had confessed the same story to him, the same chilling details he had shared with Joseph. Jonathan had mentioned that soon a new housing estate would be built on top of the landfill where Iyana's body had been dumped, ensuring that every trace of her would be erased. The police knew they were close to the truth, but they needed to find her body. The investigators returned to the junkyard where Jonathan had claimed to have dumped Iyana's remains. After scouring the area, they came upon a massive dumpster unit, and a detective was able to secure the site for excavation. The landfill contained over 155,000 tons of waste, and the body would be buried deep beneath 80 feet of debris. Finding Iyana's remains would be like finding a needle in a haystack. The search cost the authorities $1.5 million and took weeks of painstaking labor. A canine unit was brought in to help, but the dogs couldn't locate her. But the investigation was far from over. During a fingertip search, investigators uncovered something, items that they believed might belong to Iyana. Among the debris were items of clothing, including a pair of underwear that matched the ones Iyana had been wearing when she disappeared. But the body itself remained elusive. With this breakthrough, the investigators were able to send the case to a grand jury. On July 18, 2019, the grand jury indicted Jonathan for the first-degree murder of Iyana and her unborn child. But it would take years before the case would finally go to trial. In September of 2024, Jonathan stood in a courtroom, the weight of his actions laid bare before him. The prosecution presented the damning evidence, messages between Jonathan and Iyana, his brother's testimony, the confessions he made to his inmate, and the threats he had made to Iyana. Among the most chilling were Jonathan's own words from years before when he said, "I am so in love with you, I'll kill you and cry." Despite the lack of direct evidence, no eyewitnesses, no murder weapon, no CCTV footage, the jury saw the truth. In less than an hour of deliberation, Jonathan was found guilty of all charges. But the death penalty was not applied, as the law required unanimous agreement on aggravating factors. Jonathan was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Iyana's family, there was a sense of closure. Though they would never be able to lay her to rest, the man who had destroyed her life would never be free again. Iyana's case is one of unspeakable tragedy. A young girl with so much potential, preyed upon by someone who should have protected her. The haunting question remains, where is her body? And for her family, the pain of never being able to say goodbye lingers, as does the loss of a bright, promising life taken far too soon. As shocking as this case is, it raises so many disturbing questions. How could something like this happen within a family, a place that should be safe? And what drives someone to commit such unimaginable acts? I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this case? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this story compelling and want to see more in-depth true crime content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more cases that deserve to be told. And if you've already subscribed, thank you. We appreciate you more than you know. Don't forget to like this video, hit the notification bell, and share it with others who might find this story as gripping as you did. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.